Hello, everyone. Greg Otto, Editor-in-Chief of Cyberscoop here, and I'm talking with James Yeager, VP of Public Sector and Healthcare for Crowdstrike. James, thanks for joining us, and thanks for being part of the Fal.Con Public Sector Virtual Cybersecurity Conference.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and hopefully those that were able to attend the event have enjoyed it.
So the COVID-19 pandemic has changed every aspect of our world. That's why we're doing this virtually. How do you think it has changed cybersecurity?
Well, I would say it's been an awakening of some sorts, right? I think what we realized is that there is a high likelihood, whether we thought about it beforehand or not, there is a high likelihood of some sort of need for a dramatic shift to IT and cyber operations, and whether that is a healthcare or health crisis, health pandemic like we're contending with now, whether it's some sort of terrorist activity, foreign or domestic, natural disaster, act of God, whatever you want to call it, the need to make a shift and to adapt and improvise was thrust upon us. And I think IT and cyber executives alike were probably already asking their teams, how prepared are we to demonstrate our resolve in the event of a crisis like this? And no matter how many times you ask that question, no matter how good you feel or how strongly you feel about your answer there, you're never really as prepared for it as when it hits you right in the face. And so I think what we all learned was that strategic planning is an essential ingredient to IT and cyber. And whether that's your approach to people and processes, right? Do we have the right people? Are we equipped to be able to respond? Do we have the right technology, right? There's so much legacy technology scattered across the public sector arena, so much IT brick and mortar, if you will, that during COVID, at least the early stages, people were really scrambling to try and figure out, can we work remotely? Can we support our remote workers? And we got to remember, it's not just the lay person that's working from home. A human resources professional, say, for example, or someone in procurement may be able to perform the core functions of their job a little bit more readily if they're working from home, save for all the distractions that they have with kids in the background now and all that. But it's also the InfoSec men and women that are now having to still perform the core functions of their job. And what we knew and anticipated and certainly observed here at CrowdStrike and many others was that the adversaries were really showing no signs of relenting. They took no days off. In fact, their activity increased. And so how well was your team able to respond and be able to remote, kind of telnet in, to be able to gain access to machines, to kind of do infection analysis and impact analysis? And so it was kind of crazy. I think your mileage can vary. We experienced interactions with customers where they were certainly very well prepared, and we interacted with plenty of customers that really were kind of thrown for a loop. And one of the other downsides that we witnessed was, and all of us in this town witnessed, was that there was a ton of money spent, because people were really scrambling because they recognized that they were so ill prepared, whether it was on the people processes side or whether it was on the tools and technology side. They were left with no choice but to make some dramatic investments to upgrade their security portfolio and their IT portfolio so that they could adapt. And so again, a little bit of an awakening. I think, there's some lessons learned and key takeaways that I think we can all find from what happened during coronavirus.
Great. So it's 2020. The election is a few months away, and election security blends technical and human challenges together like nothing else. So where do you think effort should be concentrated when it comes to the security of elections?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's an important topic. It's one that a lot of people are spending a lot of time on. It's also a topic that I think is, if nothing else, maybe a little bit confusing or can be misunderstood. And what I mean by that is securing the election process and the election infrastructure. It's a highly delicate process. There's a lot of kind of idiosyncrasies and a lot of moving parts, but it's not necessarily about securing the votes or the ballot boxes. Are those important pieces of fabric to the elections infrastructure? There's no doubt about it. I mean, without them, we don't have an election itself, right? There's no way for our citizens to express their opinions. But I've seen many IT executives and cyber executives alike spend time focused in the wrong areas, trying to secure those systems, which, are often hardened or proprietary, and so they're hard to get to anyway. But the real meat on the bone for the adversary is the connected devices. It's that tissue and that fabric that ties peripheral systems to the actual voting machines and the ballots, whether it's paper or electronic. And so the adversary, as we've observed, is really leveraging kind of some of the most conventional techniques and methods to gain entry into an environment so that they can wreak their havoc. So it really kind of comes down to some blocking and tackling and fundamentals. Do you know where your endpoints are? Do you have a really good feel for whether or not they're protected? Do you know what software applications are running? And this is kind of that hygiene concept that's often talked about. Are they patched? What level of vulnerabilities exist on your systems? So that's one piece when you get to the technology and tools. But then it's also about, what are you doing for your workforce, right?
Okay.
What level of cybersecurity awareness training have you implemented? What type of things are you doing in advance of the elections, and have you already started them? Hopefully you have, right? On the proactive kind of assessment services side, have you had a third party come in and kind of help you look for the soft spots in your environment, right? Do you know where your weaknesses are so that you can deploy your resources now to help shore those gaps? And then on the reactive side, do you have an IR retainer, or do you have multiple IR retainers? Do you have the ability, the legal constructs and all those mechanisms set in place so that you can mobilize a team and kind of do the proverbial parachuting in of the cyber resources to jump in and protect you when, not really if, you're under siege?
So speaking about under siege, what are you seeing with the cloud that can give security teams a leg up on detecting and responding to the attacks that they're seeing grow on a daily basis?
Yeah, so the cloud has so many benefits, and the benefits are both technical and they're of the kind of economic financial variety. They are also immediate. They can be immediate, and they can be considerable. And when we're talking about cyber, we need to always make sure we're thinking about speed, right? Speed is the one variable, the most highly sought after, the most coveted variable by both the adversary and the defender. And when we make our way around, DC or around the country, talking to state and local, federal agencies, healthcare agencies, we ask them the question around, do they measure their cycle times? Do they measure how their operators can actually go through the full life cycle of incident management? Can you detect an incident rapidly and then resolve that incident rapidly? And I think the mileage can vary on the responses naturally, but sometimes it's very disheartening and alarming, right? We have customers and prospects that tell us they can measure their cycle times in days or weeks or worse, months. And what we know about the adversary is they're operating much faster than that. They're operating in minutes and hours, and if it's hours, it's low single digits, right? So what we're advising our customers to do is to leverage the cloud, certainly, right? Because it removes some of that antiquity that permeates throughout the environment, also collapses the attack surface quite a bit. But we're promoting this construct of 1-10-60, which really embraces the need for speed. And I can just define that for you quickly, so the 1 stands for 1 minute. Does your team have the ability to detect that there's an incident that's pervasive in your environment or isolated in your environment in a minute or less? The 10 stands for 10 minutes. Can your team perform a full and thorough investigation in 10 minutes or less? And 60 is for 60 minutes. Can you contain that environment, right, and prevent that incident from turning into a breach in 60 minutes or less? Now, it's an ambitious standard, Greg, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I think we need to start to really raise our standard of excellence and performance when it comes to cyber, and cloud is a great vehicle to help us get there.
So in order to get to that 1-10-60, you have to be able to operate on good threat intel. And people working in security operations are often overwhelmed with threat intelligence. So what more can agencies do to help people leverage good information out of the intel that they're bringing into their SOCs?
Well, I mean, truth be told, the threat intelligence game has changed a fair amount, right? Historically speaking, threat intelligence was about a commercial feed, content, if you will, that you're ingesting. It was about indicators of compromise, IOCs. And it's not to suggest that that model is obsolete entirely, but it is archaic, right? And it has diminishing levels of efficacy for your operations team and your cyber team. So what we are subscribing to, or what we subscribe to at Crowdstrike, and what we're coaching our customers and prospect is the notion of infused intelligence.
Okay.
If you think about an analyst who has their hands on threat intelligence, if you will, on a day-to-day basis, and you think about how they perform the functions of their job, they actually have to consume the threat intel. Oftentimes they have to declassify it. They then have to normalize it. They have to cut it up, and then they have to disseminate that and redistribute that into the various security aspects and apparatus of their infrastructure. They also have to piecemeal that up and put it out into reports that they publish, combine it with their own threat intelligence. That's a lot for the analyst to do. And when you're dealing with a customer environment that's already struggling with a strained human capital resource problem, it's a daunting task. So with infused intelligence, the notion is to intravenously bring the threat intelligence down to where the real threat is, or where the adversary is focusing, which is on the endpoint. And that's what Crowdstrike does. And what we're doing effectively is we are contextualizing that threat with the endpoint itself, so that the operator can act with confidence and precision. Because threat intelligence, at the end of the day, it's about data. And there is such a thing as too much data. If the data can't be actioned, if you don't have confidence in the data so that you can make informed decisions, then really what good is the data for you after all?
Great. James, really appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the time.